Hi viewers, welcome back to Git video tutorial. I am B.S. Satyadev, Assistant Professor, VJEC, Computer Science and Engineering Department. Until now, we have seen Git, its commands, how to install Git, how to operate, and then how to branch in Git, what is the purpose of branching. We have learned all those basic things and those commands that we can use in Git to store files in the repository. Again, update them, and all those commands we have seen. Now, all this stuff that we have learned so far is that about local Git. That means a Git repository in our local machine. Now, in this presentation, in this presentation, I'm going to talk about remote Git. I'll talk about what is remote Git and how to communicate local Git with remote Git. Before even going to understand what is remote Git, basically let's see the need for having remote Git. Now we talked about various version control system in the very beginning. Now there are local version control systems which we have learnt as Git, and there are centralized version control system and distributed version control systems. Now as I told you earlier, Git is a distributed version control system. Now what does it mean is like you have local Git, and also there are Gits in other places where you can collaborate all those local Gits as a network, and you can communicate with each other. Why do we need to do that? If you ask that question, the purpose of doing that is to have collaboration and working on the same project. Even though you are geographically separated, you can work on the same project. Now, in order to do that, you need a network of a machine. So that means all the machines that communicate, that use work on the same project should be on the same network, or they should use a way to connect to each other. Now, in order to do that, there are some third-party companies that facilitate these kind of operations. What they do is they install Git on a globally available machine, which is like you can access through HTTPS or HTTPS, and all of your code you can store there, and other people also can communicate to that repository if you provide access to them. So basically, it is working like a centralized repository, but it is not, because the whatever code that you have, it's along with its comments, it's going to be there on your machine and other machines that are connected to the central repository. So central repository is just basically another Git repository which is having your own repository, but which is accessible to many other people so that you can collaborate. So the centralized version in Git is basically for having a common place. It is not really a centralized thing that if that dies, everybody is blocked. No, it's not like that. Even if the GitHub, the centralized repository is not there, you can still communicate and work. So that's the concept, right? As part of that, the popular centralized repositories are GitHub, GitLab. So these are the two repositories. But in these presentations, we have a series. I'm going to focus more on GitHub. Okay, let's get into the presentation. How to create a remote Git repository. So a remote Git repository is nothing but a centralized repository. So let's go ahead. So about remote Git. Remote Git refers to a Git repository that is hosted on the internet or another network which has exact replica of our local Git content. So as I explained a few seconds before, so basically remote Git is nothing but you have your local Git. There is another machine which contains a copy of your Git which you communicate with that machine. So it's like it's there, but it's remote. It's not local, right? That's pretty much what is remote Git. Remote Git facilitate multiple people or system to collaborate by pushing and pulling code changes. So like I said, when you are working on a group project where people are geographically separated, so you need a common place, right? So that's where you can use remote Git. So people will be connected to that remote Git. They communicate through that remote Git, basically. Again, just want to make it much more clear. Even if remote Git is not there, still you have your local repository, and everybody who is using this repository has the same copy of the repository, right? So that's pretty much what it is. Now, Popular remote Git repositories are like GitHub, GitLab, Bitbucket, Code AWS, Code Commit. These are some of the popular. In this presentation, I'm focusing more on the GitHub. Okay. How do I set up remote Git? In order to set up remote repository, first an account needs to be created in the remote repository. For example, GitHub, right? First of all, you need to have an account in the GitHub. So you have to create a login in the GitHub. Most of the time, we can use our Google account or LinkedIn account or any Microsoft account to connect to the GitHub, because it allows authentication using Google or Microsoft or anything like that. So basically, you need to have an account on the remote repository, which is in our case is GitHub. Now, a new repository needs to be created in the remote host as per the guidelines given by the remote host provider. The first thing that we need to do is we have to create another repository in the remote host also. You have to create it. So that is the thing that we need to. So that way, I think we can store the same code in both the places. So that is the first thing. Now let's see how we can do this. Now in this picture, as you can see, so I already logged into the GitHub. So this is the front end for the GitHub, which is a web-based interface. You can see that it is through HTTPS. So it's a publicly available site where you can portal where you can communicate. Now I already logged in here, so you can see that you can see that here. So this is my dashboard, right? Now in this main dashboard, in the home screen, if you go click on this plus button in this screen, and you get list of issues. In this, you click on the new repository. So when you click on the new repository, it will go to this page. In this page, we have to select a project name. So here you can see that there is a project name. Now, it is not a mandatory thing, but it is very highly recommended. It's a good practice to have the same repository name as that of the local repository that we have. Basically, our intent is we have a local repository. We want to share it across multiple people who are geographically separated. In that context, we need a remote repository. And remote repository, we have chosen GitHub as the provider for remote repository. Now we have to create a repository there also. So the name of the repository there in the GitHub and the name that we have locally, they should be equal. Again, this is not, if they don't match, nothing is going to happen. We can still work, but it's not a good practice. It's a very strongly recommended practice to have the same repository name in both the places, local as well as the remote. Right? Once you have the name, since you want everybody to access, you make public. If you don't want, you want only certain limited set of people, so you just create private. I mean, it depends upon the requirement, right? So this is what this page talks about. So the next page is, once it's actually part of the same page. I just scroll down a little bit. There is a checkbox for add readme. Now this is basically a text file where you want to write about the project. Most of the projects, they have a readme.txt, right? So basically they are a readme.md, basically markdown. That's this checkbox is just while you are creating the project, create that readme also. Normally it's a good practice. Even if you don't check in, that's fine. It's not going to add anything. Git ignore. I already talked about what is git ignore. If you want to add a git ignore as part of it, you specify what kind of files that you are planning to use in git ignore. In this, I checked the Java file, so I just I want to have git ignore. So basically, I want to make it a public one, add readme.md and a git ignore file. And finally, I want to choose a license. That means general GNU, general public license. That means this project can be used by anybody in the world. They can use it. They can change the source code. So that's pretty much what license. So that I have said 3 things. Then we have to click on the create repository button. Right. Once you click on the create repository button, a repository is created in the GitHub. Again, this is remote repository. Now, as I selected, there is git ignore file created, license is created, GNU license is created, readme.md file is created. So in your repository, right now we have 3 files. So But again, it doesn't contain any of the files that I have locally, right? So that's pretty much what it is. So again, it is not even linked to local. I just created a remote repository with the same name as that of my local repository, which is git test repository. Okay, so there are certain known issues while creating it. If you encounter such problems like support for password authentication was removed on so and so messages, so you can go through this link, and that link explains you how to fix that problem. Again, I'm not going to go deep into that thing because it's already there. It's proven thing, so I can do it. Or alternatively, these are the steps we need to follow. Again, I just summarized what is said in the YouTube link, but exactly this exactly mimics what is said in the YouTube link. Nothing special. So an alternative way is to watching the video is to go to developer settings. You can just follow the instructions and use this command remote set URL origin, and that should work, right? So this is this is important. So yeah, that's pretty much what it is. So yeah, I think that's pretty much about remote repositories and how to create remote repository. Thank you. See you in the next video.
Like, share, comment, and subscribe VNR Digital Learning Resource YouTube channel.